But as he returned to his bed, a little sound sounded, a noise so intimate that it might have arisen inside his own body. He seemed to crackle and burn and saw the ladder's top quivering against the moonlit air. The head and the shoulders of a man rose up, paused. A gun was leaned against the windowsill very carefully, and someone he scarcely knew moved toward him and knelt beside him and whispered, "Sir, was you calling out for me? Sir, I know," and touched him. What's great about any queer love story is the escapism of it all. Really, if you're not in any kind of relationship, it works for you too. And it's something I find so intoxicating and something that I can't altogether escape. You might be thinking of the works of Gore Vidal when I talk about great gay writers, but we are going to be talking about him later. But today we are going to be talking about E.M. Forrester and his refreshingly modern ending of his novel Maurice. And like all the good it did for giving the gays that happy Hollywood ending. And you also might be asking yourself, Dustin, is this going to be like a 20-odd minute diatribe about something only you care about and very little other people care about? Yes. So if you're here watching this, you either know the story, or you know me and like me, or you're watching this ironically. And in case to those people, hello. Welcome to my Hodgepodge YouTube channel where I talk about anything and everything that I find interesting. I want to say hello to my subscribers, hello to any new people. I'm glad you showed up. This is a part of a series that I have called Gay, where I talk about gay things that I like. And if you haven't guessed already, today's subject is Maurice by E.M. Forrester. I'm going to be doing like a weird mashup of like movie and book analysis, as well as comparing the endings of The City and the Pillar by Gore Vidal and Call Me by Your Name by Andre Aciman, because I found similarities and differences, and I have to put my college degree to good use. Otherwise, it's just sitting around collecting dust for no reason. I also want to warn people that there is potentially sensitive subject matter going in. I will be putting timestamps where appropriate. I also want to say that there are spoilers for Maurice, The City and the Pillar, and Call Me by Your Name. So if you're not into that, I would skip the video entirely, because it is almost unavoidable to put timestamps anywhere to avoid spoiler content. I will also be using clips almost always, text only when necessary, because YouTube is a visual medium, and I want to better represent the story through visuals. James Ivory's beautiful, beautiful visuals. There are a lot of feelings in Maurice.
And hell.
Oh, that really hurt.
I overslept! Dominated by your disgrace, and in view of...
I say, I'm gonna think.
Maurie, quickly!
But none are stronger than the feeling of being an outsider amidst your peers. Not only is it amazing that there happens to be 4 textually proven homosexuals in this story, but 3 of them go to the same school. Which is kind of cool, and bonkers once you think about it. But it's really cool that Forrester gave all of these like gay characters their own space and time to exist and expand and become their own people and have their own conflicts. And we are going to look at these characters using sweet, lucrative context.
Horrible. He must be mad.
What you do is more important than what you say. Your deeds are more important than your words.
First, let's look at Lord Risley. He's sort of the impetus in getting Maurice to meet Clive, but he represents a much darker trend Forrester no doubt witnessed in his time on this earth: the persecution of gay men. While out and about one night, Lord Risley picks up a bellhop who then sells him out to the police. Risley is prosecuted and sentenced to 6 months of hard labor after sullying his reputation. This is never really stated by many characters in the novel, but Risley is looked upon by those he interacts with as snobby and odd, almost as though he's seeing the world through an entirely different lens. He isn't so subtle when he asks Maurice to visit his room without his fellow classmates either.
I'm eager to hear more of your interesting ideas about words and deeds. My rooms are in Trinity, and I have a dining club whose members would, if I'm not mistaken, interest you. No need to bring your chum.
Risley could be considered the least masculine gay man in the story, and he's the only one who is outed by his peers. This proves dangerous for Maurice and Clive's relationship. So now let's talk about Maurice, because he is the linchpin holding all of these characters together, and he's the main character, the titular role, as you might say. Maurice's initial thoughts about Risley's openness to spending time together is immediately superseded by Clive, who, at least to Maurice, is more beautiful and much more worthy of his attention and affection. Despite Clive's later hesitations, Maurice knows what he feels inside and that his love for other men will not go away. He's not totally sympathetic, however, as he blames his sister for he and Clive's falling out due to his jealousy and some passing remarks.
What is Mr. Durham to you? Answer.
Do you want to know what he told me just now? When I accused him of making love to you behind all our backs.
What?
When I hit him.
No, Maurice.
He said that you threw yourself at him. You.
He is loyal and driven, but finds his life lonely after Clive finds a woman named Anne to marry. He becomes increasingly more self-conscious as everyone inquires after him about any impending marriages, and he stubbornly resists Clive's marriage and even the advances of another man, Scudder, because of his own station in society. However, when he accepts that he cannot change who he is, he settles down and decides to just be happy as himself. Clive is toxic. That is the best way that I can describe him in a modern context. Clive is toxic. He doesn't necessarily lead Maurice on, so to speak, but he is the one that makes the first move and the first to break away when the going gets tough. And by going gets tough, I mean going away to Greece and deciding he's different now. This is where adaptation comes into play, and something that I think Forrester overlooked. So in the novel, there is literally almost no connection between like Risley getting his sentence and Clive going to Greece. They are like two totally separate events, and Forrester does not try to connect them at all. But James Ivory makes the incredibly smart move to link the two together by Risley asking Clive to be one of his character witnesses, and Clive denying him that decency. So Clive, after seeing Risley's sentencing, has a nervous breakdown after passing his bar exam and goes to Greece to like clear his head and get away from Maurice and set himself straight. So it makes these two unrelated moments direct influences on each other. Lastly, there is Scudder, who is the embodiment of honesty. Scudder is also the stand-in for internalized homophobia and class consciousness that is prevalent in the story. Maurice, after being dejected, initially rags on Scudder in front of him, claiming he was expecting a larger tip for carrying in bags, or outright refusing to thank him for anything. Scudder knows something about Maurice that Maurice is so desperately trying to hide, and it's ultimately Scudder's insight that gets them together. His low station as a grounds and gameskeeper at Clive's estate makes him another target for scrutiny, as it would be unfitting for anyone of Clive, who is upper class, or Maurice, who is upper middle class, to associate in a friendly manner with him. However, Scudder isn't entirely without agency. After being stood up by Maurice, he makes his way to London to confront Maurice, only to imply blackmail and immediately retract it so as not to hurt Maurice's feelings. Maurice, after all, has the upper hand due to his place. Maurice throwing himself to the wind to be with Scudder against Clive's wishes is the climax of the story and what brings Maurice happiness. So what's so significant about the ending of this story is that none of the gay characters die of any venereal diseases, nor are they made to suffer because of their sexuality. The only thing that comes close to anything dour is Risley's sentencing, and even then Forrester does not morbidly mine it for any kind of drama or malicious intrigue. It is there only to briefly incite fear. It is a thing that happened and was portrayed historically appropriately. So Maurice was written in 1913, early 1900s, in Forrester's prime, but it was not published until 1971. Forrester, as a gay man, found himself not outing himself to the public, but more so to friends and family to avoid any of that risky business that happened to the characters in his story. But the novel wasn't so much an expose of gay life in the early 1900s as it was a love letter to the men who sacrificed their lives and their happiness and their minds to fit a narrative that they didn't see as a right fit. And it wouldn't be until closer to the novel's actual publication that homosexuality would be viewed as with something with less intense fervor as it had been in decades past. My coffee's ready. I'm gonna go make it really quick. I will be right back. Pulling a Sarah Zed now. Oh. Yeah, good job, me. Maurice telling Clive off in the end is a moment that, in and of itself, is cathartic and wonderful.
Obsession. I don't need advice. I'm flesh and blood, Clive, if you'll condescend to such low things. I've shared with Alec.
Shared what?
Everything.
Not only is he confronting a past lover for hurting him, but he is finally able to tell someone of someone he loves. Something at odds of what Clive remarks earlier in the story.
Think how easy life is for people who don't have to go through all this. This secrecy. Never being able to talk about the person whom you're in love with to anybody.
And what I so appreciate about this moment is that after Maurice leaves, Clive is left wondering where he walked off to, what he did, so he's never able to just be with his wife. He is always wondering what Maurice did because he will never be able to get Maurice out of his head. And there is something similar that happens in the movie as well. One of the last scenes is Maurice. My God, Dustin, keep your characters together. One of the last things that happens in the film is Clive embracing his wife, but thinking of Maurice. The drama. And this happens, of course, after Maurice meets up with Scudder and they claim that they will never again have to be parted. It is so lovely. So lovely. Reviews at the time were mixed, to put it nicely. Many reviewers were not aware of Forrester's actual sexuality, so many people viewed it as a vapid attempt to give homosexuals a platform. Yikes. Like, why would you give a degenerate a platform? Then you might actually understand them. Get to know them. They're just like you and me. And still other people found it so trite to being an embarrassing waste of time, saying that Forrester should have literally just written an autobiography instead of giving this schmaltzy nonsense. Other reviews were ultimately a bit softer, praising the sexlessness of the whole thing and making it seem really endearing overall, that there didn't need to be graphic nudity or sexual encounters in order to be interesting. Others, though, kind of decided to pit Maurice against his other works like A Room with a View and Howard's End instead of letting it just exist as its own entity, which is kind of discouraging because you put Forrester in a box as an author who can only tell heterosexual stories because that's what he's best at. And that just kind of sucks, in my opinion. Because who wants to have a platform from the homosexuals? Who wants to get to know homosexuals better and find out that they're just like you and me? No one, except me if you look at my bookshelf. And so, that's a huge yikes today, but it's because people felt like there was a metaphorical rug being pulled out from under their metaphorical legs. Ooh, who is this gay man infiltrating the straight scene? God, it's just gross. It's just gross. Gross. But who would know the 1900s gay scene better than a gay man who lived in the 1900s gay scene? And Forrester allows his characters to think about what they did or just walk off into the sunset and be. And to me, that is just so modern. I used that title and god damn it, I'm gonna use it. I also want to contrast the ending of Maurice with the ending of the novels The City and the Pillar, as well as Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman, because academia. So right away there is a graphic content warning, so go ahead and skip to the time code present on the screen if you don't want to listen or see that. So the City and the Pillar, as teased in in the last gay episode, is about a young man who initially lusts after his friend, and after many years apart wants to rekindle with his friend, only for his friend to reject his advances, and then the main character rapes him. Yeah. And this somehow releases the narrator of any feelings he had for his friend, and it's all just a big child anyway, so bye. And this ending implies that gay men are initially more lustful and much more violent than their straight predecessors, and it's kind of damaging overall in retrospect. And it also implies that gay men are just going to lead lives of loneliness and sadness because they are who they are, and you can't fix that. And this is only further driven home because the main character has tumultuous relationship after tumultuous relationship, never settling in one spot because he's so hyper fixated on his one friend that he just cannot move on until he has him again. Blech. So what makes these two things similar and different? Let's see. So where the difference kind of comes in is that Maurice does also hyperfixate on Clive, but at least the relationship is mutual. They are together for a few years, and there is also kind of violence where Maurice accidentally bloodies Clive's lip after a misplaced kiss, but it's nothing like any kind of physical humiliation and psychological trauma that we see in The City and the Pillar. Vidal's main character becomes more of a sexual deviant, which is much more in line with the contemporary views on homosexual men. At the time, it's almost like society hated gay men. And it's almost like Vidal's main character is an attack on male heterosexuality. Literally and actually. Thankfully though, Forrester provides a little more nuance of his main character. But Vidal's character actively hates his own sexuality. He talks about it many times throughout the book. Maurice kind of does too, even to the point of hypnotizing himself in order to not think these thoughts or get down to the bottom of it. But ultimately both are accepting of their sexuality, but it's kind of what they do with it that makes the two very different. Also the fact that the two main characters walk off into the unknown is kind of eerie, but they do it with two entirely different goals. Both have conquered their object of desire, but with two entirely different circumstances behind it. It is also worth noting that The City and the Pillar had a differently original ending where the main character kills his friend, but I think that ending reads more hollow and is a much more literal interpretation of skewering heterosexuality. Maurice also featured a longer ending in the form of an epilogue. Forrester wrote that Maurice and Scudder visit his home years in the future, much to the chagrin of his sister Kitty, who never really liked Maurice and suspected something different about him the whole time, and implies blackmail, and so Maurice and Scudder decide to separate, more so out of love than fear, but they end up separated nonetheless, which also kind of sucks because it erases the total positive ambiguity of the original ending, and I just don't like it. And it's certainly nice that the two separate more out of love than fear, but it totally reads as straights won this year, guys. Better luck next century. Call me by your name on the same hand. Same hand? Well, it's not the other hand. Because I'm comparing, not contrasting yet. So same hand. Same hand. Call Me By Your Name follows a similar path in the straights have won category. In one of the final scenes, Oliver calls Elio after months of not communicating to inform him that he's getting married. Obviously shaken, Elio tries what he can to get Oliver to remember their time together, to invoke the memories of their relationship to show that, hey, maybe their love is better than anything he can drum up with a woman.
Elio.
This, Again, it stands in contrast to Maurice because even though Maurice announces his plans to enter a relationship with someone else, Clive doesn't just protest on the grounds that Scudder isn't a woman, but that he's below Maurice's station. And like this comparison gets a little muddled because one, the situations are different, but two, who you want to be like the Elio, Oliver, and Maurice and Clive stand-ins aren't entirely clear, but for the sake of this comparison, Maurice is Oliver and Clive is Elio. Yeah, my notes say that. My notes say that is correct. So, like, Clive and Elio were trying to invoke something that was, like, potentially lost somewhere along the way, with Maurice and Oliver just deciding that, I don't want it. But for, like, different reasons. And, like, hey, even if we look at, like, the color palette of these final two scenes, they are trying to evoke totally different moods. But that is only the ending of the Call Me By Your Name movie. If we look at the ending of the book, there is even more, ambiguity. Years later, Elio visits Oliver in hopes that somehow Oliver remembers what to say when he calls himself Oliver. And you can feel Elio holding his breath in this moment, and Asamon shuts it off before we can find out anything. Forster is equally tricky in this context, writing it in such a way that you just like want to shake Clive and tell him to go chase after Maurice, or at least say something, because there is so obviously still an attraction there. But Forster writes that Clive will somehow have to devise a way to conceal his true feelings from Anne about Maurice. And Elio will somehow have to devise a way to keep himself from throwing himself at Oliver if he does remember, because they are now leading very different lives. And if we wanted to draw comparisons between Call Me By Your Name and City and the Pillar, we could say that Elio and Vidal's main character are like 1 degree of separation away between desire and violence and blah 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 blah, but like that totally cuts Maurice out of the equation, and that was not the intent of this video. But it is interesting to look. Oh my god. That might be a future video idea. So ultimately, what is so revolutionary about Forrester's ending is that he does not demonize an other, but it is such a breath of fresh air to see a gay protagonist not suffer because of his sexuality and be able to just walk off into the sunset with his lover and just be. It is so nice and rare, even today. And in a time where this is like even still rare, it is so cool to read something from over a century ago that feels so modern. Forrester knew what was up. Vidal, not so much. Vidal like literally writes that he like almost like hates his character, and like the character hates himself, which is such a slog to read. It is so unpleasant. And like Vidal writes violent means to a violent end, whatever, but Forrester takes a much softer approach in letting Maurice learn from himself as well as others around him without becoming like sickly sweet or like maudlin. But Asamon leaves us with a sense of foreboding brought upon by his own characters who should have said something in a situation that they ultimately did not feel was okay. And it like even makes you think about like the romantic aspect of it all. Like, was Oliver just using Elio? Was Clive just using Maurice to explore his own sexuality? And like there's nothing wrong with like exploring your own sexuality. That is fine. But like using people for your own pleasure just to like dispose of them later is not the move. That's sick. Maurice and Elio both are abandoned by one of their lovers, but one of them pulls himself out of the mud, and the other one is left wondering what the other has been doing. Apparently in the sequel book, though, Elio does not let this go, and he becomes like weirdly obsessive from what I've read. I will not be looking at Find Me, ever, because I think the original book is devastatingly beautiful, and I probably will not touch Find Me unless I can monetize. So, sorry fanboys. The Call Me By Your Name-averse will not be expanded on this channel, no sir. So Maurice chronologically comes way before either two of these novels, and in a way it feels much more modern than the two that came after it. Actually, except no, not The City and the Pillar. The City and the Pillar is never felt modern. It feels incredibly dated and is not all that good. But what makes it stand out against big boy literature is that these two gay men, are allowed to walk off, spared by any kind of disease or death or any kind of morbid fate. And that is just so nice because it's something, even to this day, you do not see very often. The other stories put their characters in like this weird state of limbo, but not so with Maurice. At least 2 of the 4 gay friends get to walk away happily, with only one wondering whether or not he made the wrong choice. It softens a harsh reality of gay life where not many men are going to be able to walk away with the love of their life, and instead spend many, many nights alone. But Forrester provides an escape that, at least for a little bit, can help an audience believe that their agency will come someday, and it will be all the sweeter because it came on their own terms.
Now we shall never be parted. It's finished.
Alright everybody, that is going to do it for this video. If you like this content, please hit the like button or the subscription notification, the bell too. I'd really like to see you again. That Dune video is still in the works, but I am just missing the light to add the ambiance. It will be here soonish. I just ordered a lot of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia Funko Pop, so maybe expect a video on that sometime soon. Alright guys, go out there, stay sexy.